Okay, very good. So we discussed last shiur the definition of chokhmah, right? Of chokhmah, and how does that correlate with the first pasuk, right? In the word of Mishlei, of Shelomo, right? The word Shelomo represents the chokhmah. And then in the second pasuk, it's Lada'at chokhmah, etc. And then, which is also the context and the subject of the first portion of the book of Mishlei, right? Until the 10th perek. And as we said, it's also Shir HaShirim. Shir HaShirim. Okay. Now, before we move on to the Musar, I just want to shine the light of the Torah Malbim, of the Pirush of the Malbim, in the definition of Chokhmah. So we said that it comes from the Sechel Ayuni, right? The analytical Sechel. And the Malbim tells us along the lines of what the Gaon says. We said that what is Chokhmah according to the Gaon? It is to be careful from the Yetzer Hara, right? Learn the Yetzer Hara, understand how the Yetzer Hara sets you up for failure, right? And understanding also how he tickles you, how he brings you close to him. That's Chokhmah. So the Malbim explains a little bit more the definition of Chokhmah, and I think it's important also to address it. He says, גדר החוכמה היא לדעת בכל המידות והדרכים והמנהגים שיש בכל אחד מהם שני דרכים הפוכים זה מזה. He says the chokhmah is to acknowledge the different sides of a midah. So he says, for example, achzariut, cruel, rachamim, to be kind, ga'ava, anava, ego and humility, azut, being arrogant, boshet, being shy, kedusha, tum'ah, right? So says the Malbim, the chokhmah is the power, the ability to identify the two sides of a midah. So he says, and the part of the chokhmah, that's step one. Step two, that is part of the chokhmah, is to know when to use the polar sides of a midah. So he says, usually it's good to always be anav, right? So the chacham will know that in the midah that we're going to call of the anav, you can be humble, you can be arrogant, right? So he says normally you have to be anav, but sometimes you have to use the other side, which is the arrogance, when it comes to somebody that's very arrogant or rasha, somebody that's doing on purpose something against the Torah. So at that point, you have to allow that side of you that has the arrogance to take over and fight and stand for what is right.
Isn't that kind of like with Yaakov, that he needed to deal with Esav in a certain way, with almost like with treachery because of his nature?
We find this in Yaakov, we find this in Moshe Rabbeinu also, when Moshe Rabbeinu stands up against Korach.
Right.
So the Darkei HaChochma, I just wanted to bring the another layer to the definition of Chochma that we've addressed in the last few, because the only way you can actually understand the way, like on a practical level, how the Yetzer Hara sets you up, is to be able to see the panoramic view and all the facets of the midot, of the situation, right? It's only through those different perspectives that you know that the Yetzer Hara, that your weaknesses can lead you to failure because of such a midah or the other. Good? Okay. So with that, we've touched on the Chochmah. We've touched on the Chochmah. Now we're going to pass on to the second pillar, right, that we discussed. Ladat Chochmah u'Musar, right? We said that Shlomo HaMelech, when in the first pasuk he writes Shlomo ben David Melech Israel, and we explained that Ben David is Musar, right? Like the Gemara tells us, whoever sees David HaMelech in his dream, it's a Pele Hasidut. The gates of Hasidut are opened in front of him for him to grow in becoming a Hasid. And that is through the Musar. So Ben David represents Musar. And that's, like we said also, the next step, Ladat Chochmah u'Musar in Pasuk Bet, right? So we need to understand what is Musar. What is the definition of Musar? So the Gaon Mivilna tells us that Musar has two roots in the word Musar. He says, זה לייסר את עצמו, comme isurim, right? Isurim is the suffering, right? The pain. He says, if the Yetzer Hara tries to overcome you, ייסר את עצמו וישבור אותו. You have to fight it. It's painful. When you overcome the Yetzer Hara, it's painful. So you have to afflict upon yourself pain in order to break the Yetzer Hara. And there is the word Yisurim, right? Pain. But there is also the word Asur. Asur, to be imprisoned. Le'emor la'asurim se'u. We spoke about it. That's the pasuk we brought in the last shur. Asir, right? Matir asurim, we say, right? Matir asurim. We pray in the brachot in the morning. We say the bracha Matir asurim is the one that frees the imprisoned. So Musar come from those two roots, from the word to afflict pain, and from the word to be imprisoned. Says the Gaon, Lada'at Chochmah u'Musar means that a person needs to learn the Musar in order to free himself from the prison of the Yetzer Hara. And this he does through the pain that he afflicts on himself by fighting the Yetzer Hara and breaking it. Good? So the definition of that the Gaon gives, he says, when you learn Musar, for what purpose? שלא לשלח תאוותו וכעסו חופשי. He says you're not allowed to let your instinctive reactions and midot free. Don't be reactive. We spoke about it a lot, and we've addressed many times the importance of being in control. That is the purpose of the Musar. And the Musar helps you do two things. לייסר את נפשו ולמשול בתאוותו. The Musar, the application, right? The practical application of Musar has two effects. Effect number one, it's painful. Effect number two, your instincts, your desires are in your control. This is the definition and purpose of the Musar.
Rob, can I just go back for 1 second? Doesn't David represent Chesed?
No.
No. What represents Chesed? I thought we said last time that if you see something in your dream, Chesed will come your way.
Chassidut. Yes, Chassidut. Not Chesed. Chassidut. It's not the same thing.
Which means what?
Chassidut is to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu beyond what you are expected to do from the Torah. A Hasid is above a tzaddik. The tzaddik is B'lashon tzedek, does what the Torah tells him. Hasid does beyond. Lifnim mishurat hadin, will always do more.
And that's how it's connected to the Musar, because it causes pain?
No, it's connected to the Musar because if you want to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu and really get close to him, right? And become a Hasid is a devoted servant that will do whatever it takes to please his master, okay? You can only do that if you control your instincts totally, right? So it's almost, if we say you no longer allow your instinct to dictate a behavior.
And how does the Gaon suggest you do that?
That's Musar. We're not there. That's the whole book of Mishlei. So the Musar starts from Perek 10 all the way to Perek 25. That's the second portion of Mishlei, is all about Musar. It's all about Musar. And we will see that they call davar behipucho, davar behipucho, davar behipucho. We'll see that the psukim from Perek 10 on, right, talk about one thing and it's contrary, the flip sides. Okay? So, once again, it says the Gaon that the Musar, the application, now be careful, the Musar is not reading a book of Musar and closing it and feeling great. Wow, look what I have to do. Wow, look who I can become. No, that's not it. The Musar is the application of what you learn. If you want to know that you are applying properly Musar and you are using Musar, it hurts and you become in control. Two things. It hurts and you're in control.
Do you think you can use pain as a barometer to know what the decision is? Like, as an example, right? If you have an opportunity to do something to serve Hakadosh Baruch Hu, if you're, you get home from work and you're tired and, it feels difficult for you to go to shul and pray mincha and avit, and you feel that that's pain, is that a good barometer?
Yes, for sure. For
Is
sure.
it a trustworthy barometer?
It's a trustworthy barometer. It depends on the situation, but yes, it depends. If you're exhausted physically and you're tired going to, it's one thing. But if there's no reason to be exhausted, you're just tired, and you're lazy, then yes, absolutely. So, I'm getting to that. It's very good you're raising this point, because the Musar Gaon says does not stop by holding yourself back from doing negative things. He says, לבטל רצונו בכל נתיבותיו אפילו לדבר מצווה. Meaning that you don't, even a mitzvah, you don't do it because it feels good to do it, or because you think it's right. Not everything you think is right in mitzvot also means it's a mitzvah. He says you have to be able to do it לעשות רצונו של מקום. He says, and by doing this, now the Yetzer Hara, this instinct that's pushing you to do apparently a mitzvah, right? But in the long run, it's a setup for failure for another mitzvah that is really a mitzvah. By controlling that instinct, now your Yetzer Hara starts doing the real mitzvot. Again. If you do something that seems to be a mitzvah, in yeshiva, they used to tell us studying until very late at night. That was the so you think you're doing a big mitzvah, you're doing in the middle of the night, but in reality, what's going on? You're going to sleep at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. You have to wake up at 6:30 to go to shacharit. You don't wake up, or you wake up, you're completely tired, so you don't pray properly. So now it's very possible that your tefillah is not tefillah. If you wake up, and if you didn't wake up, you missed Kriyat Shema Bazman, you missed tefillah. So at midnight, when you were learning and you were on a high, thinking that you're doing a big mitzvah, says the Gambivna, that's the Yetzer Hara. That's the Yetzer Hara. If you tell the Yetzer Hara, if you tell yourself at midnight, I would love to learn, but I'm stopping now to go to sleep and wake up in the morning, and you wake up in the morning, yes, now you use your Yetzer Hara to do mitzvot. He says, it's not about if the kavanah, if your intention feels good. I had good intention. Okay, good. It's right. It's nice that you had good intention, but that's not how you serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Musar, says the Gaon, is helping you through what we said, through the pain and through the mastering of your and the controlling of your instinct, results to the ability, right, to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu based on Hashem's intentions, not on your own intention. ותר ליבנו לעובדך באמת, כן? We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, purify our heart to serve you. Right? We want to do רצונך. In Yerushalmi, in Brachot, it says that Avraham Avinu עשה יצר הרע טוב. He turned his יצר הרע into good. How? Says the Gan, that's how. He didn't do mitzvot because it felt good. He did mitzvot because that's what was Hashem wanted from him. We see that also in the mitzvah of tzedakah. Sometimes we give tzedakah, or we do tzedakah, or we do chesed because it feels good, and we don't do it because this guy, for whatever reason, or I'm not in the mood, or not now. I just hang up the phone. I'm upset. Come back tomorrow. But if the mitzvah is mitzvah Hashem, if you're doing l'retzon Hashem, it's irrelevant if you're upset now or you're happy now. That's the mitzvah. You understand the level? That's what we're aiming, says the Gaon, when we're learning Musar. That's what Shlomo HaMelech is referring to when he's talking about Ladat Chokhmah u'Musar. And what the Musar does now is, after you understand Ladat Chokhmah, after you understand the Yetzer Hara, after you see how he tries to fail you, right? And you understand how you are stuck, now you can apply the Musar, right? By breaking it, by breaking all these chains. Now, the Gaon continues and says, the layer of the sechel that is used to apply the musar that you learn practically is the sechel ha-mahashavi, the philosophical mind that we spoke about. It's one layer under the analytical mind, the philosophical mind. That's what you use to understand the midot. The sechel ha-mahashavi helps you understand the values, put sense into it, make you realize what's right, what's wrong in the midot, in the ruach. And if in the last shiur, when we spoke about Shlomo, we spoke about the Torah, right? The representation of the Torah. That's what Shlomo represents. Ben David represents the midot, right? Because if you have good midot, you become a Hasid, right? At that point, when you control your midot, and that the Rambam calls it also, and you know how to be a little bit more of the good midot, that's how you become a Hasid. So Shlomo is referring to the Torah Kedosha. Ben David referring to the midot. That's the wisdom, that's the chokhmah behind the word umusa.
Rabbi, I'm trying to understand why the sechel hamachashavi, the philosophical layer, is used for this and not the analytical. Doesn't it also seem analytical?
That's the chokhmah. The chokhmah organizes everything. Yes.
Right.
After that, analytical is not what you use to enforce upon an emotion a behavior. We are all very, very analytical. We're all very logical. That doesn't stop us from doing things and getting upset and getting lazy and getting emotional. The philosophy of the thing is basically taking chokhmah, if you will, and when you sit with a psychologist, there's a lot of philosophy that goes and explanation and sides.
That's the emotion.
That's the emotion. Exactly. 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 That is Musa. That is Musa. The Gaon wants to bring a nuance, and he says that the Musar is usually helpful to the ones that to the Yetzer Hara that of the Ta'avot that we spoke about in the last shiur, to the Yetzer Hara that stocks the person in a golden prison. Because the ones that is in the darkness, the influence of the knowledge of the Torah will be much, much more helpful than how to break the chains. He's not in prison. He just doesn't know where to go. Showing the direction, he will go, right? The Musar is really applicable to the side, to the wrongdoings that we are doing because of a hergel, because of a habit, and we cannot break our ways. So it's important also to understand how to use the Musar in our own essence, right? There are things we don't know, and we don't want to know. We're lazy and we're comfortable. And there are things we know, but you know what? I like it. I'm comfortable with it. I don't want to change. I built a whole life around this. I'm not going to start changing. Everybody does it, right? That's the prison we're in. For those types of challenges, for those types of restrictions, of constraints, we need to use the Musar to break ourselves and free ourselves from those impulsive reactions of the Yetzer Hara.
Rabbi, I just want to understand the trajectory. So ultimately, you're building up to be able to use Chokhmah, Binah, V'Da'at for every situation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Right now we're talking about Musa.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is we're using the Musar now, going back into the idea from Chokhmah, which is understanding, right? Because we said
it's another layer, right? It's after you understand that you have you understand the weaknesses, you understand the issue, the problem. Boom, you bring the Musar and let me tackle it, right?
So they're linked.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
What the Gaon is doing right now is explaining why Shlomo HaMelech also wrote what the sequence of what he wrote in the first pasuk, in Mishlei, and overall in his work. Good. Okay. The Gaon, and that will be the transition. That will be the transition to Le'avin Imre Bina. The Gaon in the Likutim says something very fundamental. He says, "Yadua shetzarich la'avodat haborei gimel devarim." If you want to be Eved Hashem, if you want to serve Hashem, you need three things. Very, very, very basic, important. Lessons. Ehad. Always, always, always challenge your Yetzer Hara and make sure that your Yetzer HaTov wins the battle. Meaning, you always have to be in the optic of challenging yourself. Yes, you have a weakness, overcome it, acknowledge the fact that you overcame it, and you were successful. Says the Gaon, when a person challenges himself all the time, he starts to understand, know, and actually even master his Yetzer Hara. Because when you ask yourself, okay, so what are my weaknesses? What's right? What's wrong? What's good? What's bad? Who is my Yetzer Hara? You cannot know. So he says, you want to get to know your Yetzer Hara. You want to get to know your own enemy that lives within you. Start fighting all the time those negative behaviors that you have in you, right? And always acknowledge that the success, that you've overcome it.
Right, so it's like a reflection process of figuring out all the places in your life where you fell.
That's right. That's right. That's right. He said, why is it so important to know what's weak within you, what's the Yetzer Hara within you, and what's the Yetzer HaTov within you? He says, because the difference between the two is very, very, very fine in the root. Yes, in the outcome, maybe it's a gross difference. But in the shoresh, in inception, the nuance is very, very narrow. So he says, I'll give you a trick. You want to know? You want to know when you're about to do something, it's Yetzer Hara, and when you're about to do something, it's Yetzer HaTov. The gold and the $1 million answer. Listen to what he says. The Yetzer Hara, when he wants you to do something, he sparks an excitement with many, many, many good reasons why you have to do what you're doing. He says, when you are excited and you convince yourself through many reasons to do something, you should know it's Yetzer Hara. Why? He says, because the Yetzer HaTov, the Tov is Tamim. Yaakov Ishtam, Tmimut. Tamim, you don't need excitement. You do it because you have to do it. It's normal to do it, right? You eat, you can be excited when you're hungry to eat. But when you're not hungry, you're not excited to eat. You eat. You breathe, you're not excited to breathe. because it's normal to breathe. And when it's right, you don't need any explanations. It's right. He says, היצר הטוב אינו צריך לומר לו המעלות, מפני שהוא בעצמו טוב. When something is good, you don't need to be convinced. Good? Clear?
An example could be an example of when you get excited about, because sometimes you get excited about doing positive things. So when I get excited, yetzer hara, wait. So perhaps again, a mashal can bring a...
We're in Mishlei. It's all about Mishlei.
Yeah.
It's all about Mishlei. It's all about Mishlei. Sometimes we're going to take again the mashal of what we were taught in yeshiva. Yeah, it's 11:30 at night. Okay, you're learning, and you know it's late. You know it's late. So you're going to tell yourself, you know what? Look, it's almost Chatzot. Hashem loves the Torah of Chatzot Laila. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to write. And you push yourself, you motivate yourself to do something, okay? So that you can justify the act, okay? When you wake up in the morning and you go to pray, you have to justify yourself why you wake up and why you go to pray. You wake up, you go to pray because that's the right thing to do. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, but Hashem loves Chatzot studying.
Nachon, at what count? At what count? Again, if you do that every
night, in order to be better, you have to train yourself. One day you're tired, 2 days, perhaps after 1 month.
But that's not the point.
We're
not talking about somebody that wants to train. We're not talking about somebody that wants to train. We're talking about somebody that is on a high right now, and we know he's gonna have a hard time waking up in the next day. You're not talking about yeshiva. We're not talking about somebody that wants to do a tikkun chatzot every night. Again, it's to me it's an example that I lived myself. Yes, so I relate to that example personally.
It happens to me to read Bloomberg at 11:30. What can I learn from that? It's yetzer hara. Go to sleep.
Nachon, if you convince yourself, if you think, yes, you're right. You know what? You're right. I have to go to a shiur, I have to sign a deal. So now you're going to convince yourself why, but you know, if I don't go, he's not going to call. If I don't do, if I don't this, until you convince yourself it's the right thing to do, and you feel good about it, right? But when you come to the shiur, hey, we're all very excited about the shiur. It's great, but do we have to be convinced? No, it's clear. It's good. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. So sometimes we're torn between two decisions. Good? Is that a good enough example?
Yes, I got it.
Okay. So that is number one. That is the first lesson in order to be Oved Hashem. The first lesson to be Oved Hashem is to always fight, overcome your yetzer hara, overcome your weaknesses, so that you get to know your yetzer hara better, so you can control it and master it. Says the Gaon, and if you want to know how to differentiate your yetzer hara from your yetzer hatov, if you need to convince yourself to do something, there's something wrong. If an opportunity comes in front of you and it's a mitzvah, and you need to be reminded how good it is, or why it's so good to do it, it might be yetzer hara.
Right. When you really think about it, just using the morning example in the shul, never convincing yourself, yeah, you should go to shul because it's good for you. No, you're convincing yourself, if I pray at home in Yachid, I'm going to pray better because I'm more clear in my mind. Andy, you could be excited, but you're never going to really convince yourself to do the right thing. You're always convincing yourself the other way.
Nachon. No, but that's it. And that's the Yetzer Hara versus the Yetzer Hatov. Nachon. Lesson number 1. Lesson number 2. He says, since the Yetzer Hara, Arum Bidrachav, is very wicked, very twisted, right? Very manipulative. You have to be also using the same techniques to fear Hashem. Manipulate situations, manipulate your emotions, manipulate your behavior, so that you always fall back on your 2 feet of what? Of fearing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you have to go with the Yetzer Hara be'armumiyut. He says, and that's where he comes and he says what we discussed in the last Shurim. He says, the Yetzer Hara sometimes, he's very patient. So he's going to build around you an ecosystem, opportunity, success, let you grow, and you don't realize you're digging a very deep hole, very, very deep hole. Until one day you open your eyes and you say, 1 second, everything I built around myself ended up hurting me. I thought I was doing something good. I thought I was developing. I thought I was producing. And I just realized that I'm stuck in a golden prison. I cannot make any moves now. I cannot make decisions. And if I move one thing, everything cripples around me. And we spoke about it in the last show. Okay. So he says, what does it mean to be arum, to be sneaky? He says, in Yirat Shamayim, you have to be sneaky also. Always in situations, ask yourself, where's the catch? Where's the catch? The Yetzer Hara is playing with me. What's the catch here? And if you always train yourself to look for the catch, you will always reveal the Yetzer Hara. Once you reveal the Yetzer Hara, you can overcome it. You understand? There's always a hidden catch. So always look for it, so that you can identify the weak side and overcome it.
Rob, what's an example of of something that you can ask, what's the catch, or what kind of situation, and you uncover the Yetzer Hara? I'm trying to think of one.
Somebody organizes a fundraiser.
I got it.
On the beach.
I knew where you were going.
That's it.
What we discussed yesterday.
Yeah.
I got it.
Okay. The third one, I'm giving bold things, and after that you have to refine it in your own way. Yeah. He says the third one, every time you learn, he says the following. He says, from the word Bereshit all the way to the end of the Torah, Le'enei Kol Israel, every letter, every word is another advice that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hides in the Torah for a specific situation. Okay? So says the Gaon, every word of the Torah, every lesson of the Torah that you learn, says the Gaon, be careful, because that lesson, the way you learn it and the way you internalize it, is a lesson and an advice that Hashem is sharing with you that you will need at some point in the short term or long term. So never dismiss or belittle a hidush of Torah, no matter how it comes. And he says, the more you become attentive to what you are learning, sometimes it could be a conversation in a car, over the phone. Somebody calls you to say, can you come and complete a minyan, and you hear 2 or 3 words of Torah. Or so. Says the Gaon, if you create that sensitivity and you become attentive and alert to what you learn at all time, you develop a chokhmah that will subconsciously always find a personal message in every word of Torah that you learn. That basically Hashem is talking to you. Good. These are the 3 pillars, the 3 fundamentals needed to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a general level, right? To fight your Yetzer Hara at all time and acknowledge the positive, you winning helps you identify the Yetzer Hara. Number 2, always find the look for the catch that allows you to identify how the Yetzer Hara hides in every situation. So you create an awareness to always look for what's coming. And number 3, educate yourself to always be attentive to what you learn and find how it applies to you, because it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu talking to you and sending you personal messages that will be an advice at some point in your life. He says, with these 3 fundamentals, now the 2 facets of the Yetzer, or 2 types of Yetzer Hara that you encounter, you can overcome. The first one is behavioral, right? Yetzer Hara, the hergel, the habits that you cannot break, the bad habits that you can break. Now we know how to identify it, we know how to fight it, we know, right? And the second one is the heaviness, the laziness of ignorance, right? The heaviness of ignorance. And through the Torah that you learn, that ignorance starts disappearing, because you're always making sense in what you learn. Doesn't matter if it's an halacha between mincha and arbit, doesn't matter what it is. Good? And that leads us to the third portion of the book, that is defined by the word Melech Israel in the first pasuk, right? which is the mitzvot, which is, so the first Shlomo is Chokhmah, Ben David is Musar, Melech Israel is the Torah, right? The practical Torah, which are the mitzvot. And this is defined in the Pasuk Bet in the words Lehavin Imre Bina, to understand the words of logic. And says the Gaon, he says sometimes you learn Musar and you break the Yetzer Hara, but you go too far. You do too much. You overkill it. And he says it's not good. Sometimes you see people, they do Teshuvah and they go from 0 to 100, yeah? And they disrupt everything and they go to too much. He says, no. He says, you have to do it b'darkei noam, with the path of Torah. The Torah is ne'ima, the Torah is sweet, the Torah is gentle, the Torah is good. So you can accomplish exactly the same thing, but in a sweet, soft, beautiful way, instead of making it disruptive, rough, and painful. And that's lehavin imre bina. Apply the chokhmah of the Torah, apply the mitzvot, learn the mitzvot, target your mitzvot in order to change your behavior and to enlighten the darkness of your ignorance. So, for example, making sure you get on time, shaharit, the same minyan, builds the habit to overcome laziness. So that's how you fight laziness. If you learn not to speak Lashon Hara, you reduce arrogance. If you make sure to get involved in the chesed program and to give tzedakah, so you become kind. If you be careful with the words that you use and you're not kasa and you don't let yourself becoming angry, you become anav. You understand what I'm saying? So the lehavin imre bina, to understand the words of logics of the Torah, is the practical Torah. How do I apply this and change myself? The mitzvot, how do I take a mitzvah and grow with it, grow from it? Says the Gam Mivina, the intellect that we use in order to apply the mitzvah that we're doing to heal, cure, or fix a bad trait comes from the sechel ha'ma'asi, the practical intellect.
And that relates to Melech Israel because we discussed that the idea of Melech represents Torah, right?
Correct. Melech is the one that institutes, organizes, imposes the rules of the Torah, practicality. So the Gaon, so also there's one nekuda I need to add. Le'avinim rebina. He says, if you apply the mitzvot correctly, you will learn to follow the Torah and not follow your Torah, follow the Torah. We have tendency to make the Torah a version that is called my version. I have my Torah, I have my own Torah. I do my own mitzvah, don't tell me. I do it my way. Not our way, not our way. That's not our way. Yeah. No. There is a way, only one way. It's called the Derech HaTorah. So the Gaon says something beautiful. He says, if you apply correctly the mitzvot and you use it practically, you will build such a logic and such coherence in your mitzvot that you will understand that it's not about my mitzvot, it's only about the mitzvot. Because when you do it right, it hits home. It changes you. It builds you. It reinforces you. That's the difference between if you do a mitzvah or if you do your mitzvah. Good? Now, this being said, the Gaon will now do two other parallelism. Essentially, we're going to again. He says the world is made of Shamayim, Aretz, and Adam, right? Men, Shamayim va'aretz. What is Shamayim? Sodot Torah, right? It's the Torah, etc., right? It says that's Shelomo, that's the Chokhmah, that's the Sechel Hayuni. Shamayim. Aretz is practical mitzvot. And what is in between? The behavior, Adam. Shelomo, Shamayim. Ben David, Adam. Melech Israel, Eretz. Lada'at Chokhmah, Shamayim. Musar, Adam. Le'avin Imre Bina, Aretz. These are the three elements required that basically makes the whole ecosystem. Shamayim va'aretz ve'adam. So in two psukim, in the first two psukim, the Gaon already summarized the entire ecosystem of creation, its dynamic, challenges, and how to fix it. Be'ezrat Hashem. With this, I think
I'm exhausted.
Chaz v'shalom. That's that. With this, we finished Be'ezrat Hashem the first two pesukim. We did pasuk Aleph and pasuk Bet. Be'ezrat Hashem. Tov.
So, tomorrow, 10 a.m.
Be'ezrat Hashem.